Hi everyone, my name is Lorinda, and I'm super excited to be here today. As someone who grew up watching football, having Didier Drogba here was amazing. So I'm super pumped for the conversation that we're about to have. Before introducing our panel, I want to engage you a bit. Who here has ever used a mobile money platform in some shape or form? Okay, some hands have not been raised, surprise. Who here has been using ChatGPT recently to do whatever work they've been trying to do? Okay, everyone in the room. Amazing. Who has followed the recent ChatGPT versus DeepSeek debate online? Not everyone. Okay, wow, we got a lot to learn from you guys today. Amazing. So the conversation that we're about to have is around technological innovation and global integration. Africa's digital economy has been rapidly growing, driven by a dynamic startup ecosystem and increasing global investment. African startups alone in 2024 have raised over $2 billion, with Kenya surpassing Nigeria as the top investment destination. The continent is now home to more than 600 tech hubs, driving innovation across fintech, health tech, edtech, and e-commerce, and mobile adoption continues to surge. Yet, despite this amazing momentum, we still have challenges on the ground, infrastructure gaps, like we've discussed yesterday with Dr. Daniel Ormeños. We've talked about regulatory barriers even earlier today with Rebecca, and the digital divide between the urban and the rural areas. So today our big question is, how can Africa leverage technical innovation to strengthen its global position, drive inclusive growth, and carve out a uniquely African path in the digital era? And to explore this, I'm incredibly excited to have an amazing set of panelists with me. So I'll start by introducing Mr. Rashid Abdallah, who's right on my right here next to me. He's the managing director at Goldman Sachs, where he leads the global web and mobile platforms, engineering for the executive office, and several other tech-driven initiatives at the firm. Mr. Kojo is the vice president for public policy for Africa, the Middle East, and Turkey at Meta. And he was recognized in 2023 as one of the UK's top 100 most influential Black people. And online, we have Kwadwo, who I believe is here already. I'm trying to confirm. Okay, perfect. So online we have Kwadwo Uzuagiman, who's the Ghana country lead for Paystack, the Stripe-owned fintech helping businesses across Africa process payments globally. So can I just have a quick round of applause for our panelists now? Perfect. So let's dive right in. So the African digital economy, like I mentioned, is growing very fast. We're seeing players like Flutterwave, Paystack, redefining financial services. We're seeing agri-tech companies like Twiga Foods transforming food distribution on the continent, and platforms like Anzela that are creating a new generation of tech talent. I want to start with you, Rashid. With increasing mobile penetration, internet adoption, and AI advancements, where do you see the biggest opportunities when it comes to tech-driven innovation on the ground, on the continent?
Thank you, and hello everyone. I'm definitely very pleased to be here. I'm just impressed by the quality of the people, the whole setup, right? And I can appreciate all the effort that went into it. I think just piggying back on what Didier Drogba said in the previous session, so education and healthcare remain our biggest challenges on the continent. I'm from Sudan, and I've seen firsthand a lot of the challenges, and let alone the rural areas, just within the urban buildups that are there. In my mind, before we even go to the exciting new field of AI, just taking advantage of the mobile penetration that's there, the internet technologies, making sure that we have universal access to quality education, quality healthcare, and finance, and then all the improvements we can see in the agricultural, energy, government, et cetera, right? But just going back to education and healthcare, just being able to get to, and there are a ton of young people on the continent hungry for knowledge. I think one of the challenges I've seen back in Sudan is just having access to books, basic things where you can just get that knowledge. When I studied, it was a challenge. the internet now sort of like provides you with a ton of opportunities with knowledge. It remains generic, like not catering for the African needs. I think there's an opportunity there to just focus on e-education, just how to get the right content to the right audience. Mobile is definitely getting more and more across the continent. Again, there are opportunities there for startups to innovate, like how to best use mobile technologies to give education to people. And then you bring in AI, right? Like just the fact that you can actually tailor the content, do digital assessment, like automatically help the teachers to scale up their effort, being able to, rather than just have one person speaking to a classroom of like 100 people, tailor that content to the individual so people who are talented can progress at more pace, people who need more attention. Like I think AI can help with that sort of level of customization. Healthcare, again, is a huge opportunity, right? Like I think the number of different just languages and cultures and barriers to access, there's a whole revolution around telemedicine, just being able to diagnose people remotely. But there's a barrier, right? Like how do you get to the local person who doesn't speak English, who doesn't know how to sort of like interface with these technologies, and just being at that last leg of how can I make sure that these awesome inventions that happen across the world can actually cater for the local population. I think that's another huge opportunity. And I can go on, right? Like, so finance has its own set of things that we can think about. Energy, there are already huge innovations. Agriculture, right? Like the mechanized sort of irrigation and sort of like just using AI to distribute the water in the right quantities, etc. Lots of opportunities, I think, for technology to really transform Africa.
I absolutely love this. I really think that education and healthcare sectors where we can really make a difference on the continent with the technologies that are being developed. I actually want to turn to you, Kojo, now. We talked a bit about AI that is being accelerated. I'm sorry for interrupting you while you're drinking water.
There's two Kwajos. Kwajo Etisane. We're both Monday born. He has the account spelling.
The meta one.
Yeah.
So we're seeing AI being adopted across the continent, and it comes with opportunities and challenges, including the dominance of Western trained data. And to address all local challenges, we need technology that is based on our actual realities, on our actual needs. So we need to train more. We need to train more models on African languages. We need to make sure that what comes in is actually representative of the local population. So I want to know, with major players like OpenAI that are driving advancement in generative AI in the world, how do you see the landscape evolving, and what roles can company like Meta play to make sure we're building a more inclusive AI on the continent?
So there's lots in there.
It is.
What I'm gonna say first is how grateful I am to be here, and that's very, very genuine. I arrived yesterday at about 1:15. I got off the train at the station and was supposed to pop my head in to say hello and then go and get changed into a smarter wear and stuff. I sat here for 4 or 5 hours listening to the debate. It was fascinating, and a huge thanks to not only the speakers. Bear with me 1 second, because you're gonna have to give yourself an applause as well. A huge thanks to the students and the attendees here as well. I went to the dinner yesterday. Many, many moons ago, more than a couple of decades ago, when I chose my university, I chose to go to SOAS. I didn't have the opportunity to go to Oxford. I chose to go to SOAS. Getting a feeling of the Oxford College yesterday and the dinners you have here, and I know there's much more than that, just studying going on, was amazing. And to speak to so many amazing people in this cohort of MBA people was fantastic. So I just wanted to say a huge, huge thanks for stimulating my mind in so many ways. So thank you so much. Lorinda, a couple things. I'm gonna pick on you and a couple of other people. All I hear is ChatGPT. We're also here. At least soon, if it's not for EU regulation, we'll have, or European regulation, including the UK, I'll throw the UK in there. We would have had Meta AI on most of your devices by now. In many of your markets, certainly in places like Ghana, Nigeria, much of the Middle East, if you open your WhatsApp now, Meta AI sits there. And I would encourage you to use it in, what did someone describe this morning? A lazy kind of search? Yeah, use Meta AI. We're trying to get rid of the hallucinations and stuff. So we have competition, and also just Lorinda quickly, the DeepSeek thing wasn't DeepSeek against against ChatGPT, although Mr. Altman was very clear that it meant a change of model for them potentially. It created questions for the whole industry in terms of AI. Can we do it at 5.6 million? All of that kind of stuff. So it's a big question. On this particular piece, and I said there was a lot in your question. I'm going to go first to the opportunity piece. And I think our open source AI, our Llama models, 1, 2, 3, 4, create incredible opportunity for this continent. Yesterday, I listened to, is it Professor Aramis? Forgive me. Amaris, yes. And he said he wrote something, and there were some provocations in there. Me being me, late last night, I went and read those provocations. And there's one in particular about how we look at ourselves. At least I think that's what he was saying. It was late. So how we look at ourselves as Africans. And I've heard a bit of that over the last couple of days. We don't have energy. We don't have data. We don't have this. We don't have people connected. I get it. All true. But I also think that, like me, and in my experience, most of us are half glass full people rather than half glass half empty. We get on with things despite. We manage. My view is one of the opportunities in front of us is open source AI. That Meta provides, as do others. Feel free to choose something else. But people are building on Llama right now. Developers, companies, building solutions and building businesses using open source AI. And I think that's an incredible opportunity for the continent. I think actually more for our continent than any other. I have an admitted bias that everyone knows about. I think our continent, and it's in part proven by the discussions I've had with people here, has the youngest, most intelligent people on it. And I think people are building on Llama. I can speak to the guys who are doing Fundamate, which is a education app built using Llama. I can speak to Digital Green, some guys who are providing agricultural information to farmers who didn't have it before through SMS built using Llama. I can speak to Jacaranda, which is a health app in which people across our continent are getting prenatal information, ensuring that the birth of the children, who will be the future of our continent, is far safer. So I think there's an incredible opportunity in front of us. I heard yesterday, and in part your question had this in there as well, is kind of what about African data sets and where are they and all kinds of stuff. I get that too. I will say that Africa has a hell of a lot of data. It may not be in a data set where the engineers might say, here it is, clean and to go. Two things. One, there are organizations who will point to the fact that they are building data sets. The African machine learning community is just one, where they're building data sets to help these models. Two, as I travel around the continent, and I was just in Addis Ababa for the African Union meeting, and I went to the Ethiopian AI Institute, there are government players using those data sets. There are commercial companies using those data sets to create solutions now. So I think there's a lot going on the continent that actually many of us are aware, but many of us are unaware. And I think the more we share information about actually what's going on, and the more we enable each other to learn, whether you be a developer, an entrepreneur, or a government to learn, to help others learn about what's going on, the better we'll feel. And I think many of these discussions will be about half glass full rather than half glass empty. I hope that makes a little bit of sense for the first question.
It makes absolutely sense. And I think it's a very nice segue to my question to Kojo, who is online. I hope you're hearing me well. So you talked about seeing things that have worked, successful examples, and I think Paystack is definitely one of them. Paystack has gained global recognition. We talked about it as well earlier with Rebecca on stage. They've been acquired by Stripe. So I would love to hear from you, Kojo, on the fact that they've been acquired by Stripe brings increased investment, market access. It's an amazing opportunity to grow, but it also raises questions about long-term local ownership and leadership. So I would like to get some key lessons from Paystack's growth. What can other startups learn, and how do they navigate global expansion while still retaining some local control?
Okay, first of all, quick sound check. Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly, yes.
Great. Okay. So it's a pleasure to be here as well. I would have loved to be there in person, but I couldn't fly in time. So hopefully I'll see you guys another time. To your question, Lorinda, so Paystack story is pretty much about a company that's very super product focused. And our mission has been to grow the GDP of the internet, pretty much allow anybody to start anything on our platform and build and to start, build, and scale any business idea on our platform, right? So what we've seen over the years up to, or what we saw over the years up to exit was Paystack was lucky enough to find investors that aligned with their vision. And you heard Rebecca say in a previous session where people made some great returns from investing in Paystack back in maybe a decade ago. Right now, it looks obvious, but at the time, you can imagine how ambiguous investing in a payments company coming out of Nigeria was. So fast forward to 2018, Paystack was raising Series A. Stripe was one of the lead investors in that round. And the reason why Stripe was in that round is there was a lot of alignment to what Paystack was building for Africa and what Stripe is building for the world. Both companies were trying to increase GDP of the internet. We're trying to be a platform where people can have all the tools they need to scale their business online. And there was just a lot of alignments there. And then it led to 2 years later, the exit. Right. Now, in terms of, you mentioned long-term leadership. So another thing is the Paystack leadership team is quite strong, has the right context to build for Africa. Stripe does not have any African experience, which is why we run and own our own product roadmap, and we're rolling out as we go, and Stripe concentrates on the rest of the world. Another thing you touched on was on expansion. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of how that has been our expansion story. So Paystack 2018 raised Series A, 2020 exited Stripe, and then the mandate became we have to be everywhere. We have to take our services across the continent. Ghana was one of the first markets which Paystack tried to expand to. And at the time, if you're in Nigeria expanding to Ghana, you just look at it like Lagos is 40 minutes away from Accra. We both speak English. We're both West African countries. We're similar, at least at a high level. And you might overlook the nuances of what it takes to actually build a version of your company for that market, right? So we learned pretty quickly that expansion is super, super contextual, requires super localization. Customer behavior is different. What the businesses find important for a payment company is very different in Ghana versus Nigeria versus Kenya. The payment channels they're used to are different, right? So at the high level, you're solving the exact same problem. You're trying to give people tools to become digital businesses and to scale, but the nuances are very, very different. And that showed very early in our expansion. We realized that in Ghana, mobile money is the most dominant payment channel. So you can't build a platform without offering channels that people want or people are used to. It's different in Kenya where they have M-Pesa. South Africa is big on EFT and has a high card penetration. So I think the first lesson is super localization and contextual. And the contextual nature of each market is very different. And that's what has worked for us so far. In terms of local ownership, I think that's one of the things you mentioned as well. So if you look at the Paystack story, and I think you were talking about retaining local ownership, Paystack is 100% owned by Stripe, but that in itself has created an opportunity for Paystack employees, right? So we're all part of one big company on Stripe. All the almost 300 Paystack employees have equity in Stripe. And if you look at the long-term potential upside for any Ghanaian, Nigerian, Kenyan, South African, Ivorian who works for Paystack and is part of one of the biggest companies in the world, I think it's underrated the potential long-term effect that will bring as vis-a-vis something like PayPal Mafia, people who are ex-Google who have gone on to start their own companies. And that's the kind of effect that we're looking for long term. Now, imagine this happens across multiple companies, just like Paystack, every single year across different sectors, and how transformative that will be for the continent.
Thank you, Kojo. Amazing. This really resonates, and I want to make a link between what you said, Kojo, and Kojo, what you both said. I think we're seeing this growth, these amazing startups that are having amazing successes. We're seeing the work that Meta is doing on the ground, but we're still seeing a huge digital divide on the continent with African urban centers that despite African urban centers that are still thriving, we have millions that are still lacking internet. And I wonder how has Meta been working on the ground with actual local startups, government. I know there are initiatives like the To Africa, the Express Wi-Fi, but how have you been working on the ground with government, with local startups, to then help bridge that gap so that we are not just focusing on Lagos, on Accra, on Nairobi, but we're also thinking about the more rural places?
It's part of the reason why I joined. So I've been doing this now, I call kind of ICT for socio-economic development, which is how I frame what I do, for 22 going 23 years now. And part of the reason why I joined Meta, then Facebook, almost 9 years ago, was exactly this, their focus on connecting the unconnected and actually trying to tackle the most difficult challenges with that. I'd done a bit for a few other organizations and was given the promise that we would go bigger, harder, quicker, faster, better, in partnership with others. You initially said government, I was like, it's everyone. So it's with governments, it's with mobile players, it's with CSOs, it's with training organizations, with all sorts. I think in the kind of short answer, and it won't be too short, but the short answer is holistically is how we've approached it. So we've done everything from investing in connectivity projects, the most recent being To Africa, which won't be in about 3 years' time, but is now the longest submarine cable in the world. First time that East to West Africa has been connected, or West to East Africa, if you're that way inclined, has been connected. And if you're as old as me, and you remember the monopolies that the oligopoly that used to exist on the West Coast through, in my view, oligopoly that used to exist on the West Coast through Sat3, and then, in my view, the oligopoly that used to exist on the East Coast, to have one cable that's open access, as all our cables have been to date, designed to ensure that anyone who wants to connect can connect, and designed to ensure that the price of internet connectivity falls. That, for me, is a huge project. If you haven't read about it, please go and read about To Africa. The team has done amazing work alongside our other partners in landing that cable. At the same time, we can speak to, and is the governor from Katsina here today? He's left. Wonderful man, very focused on the state and on Nigeria. We can speak to investments we've made in places like Nigeria, Uganda, South Africa, DRC, where we've gone and put in, to great expense, terrestrial cables, again designed to connect the unconnected. In Uganda, where Facebook remains banned, we put in around 750 kilometers of fiber, connecting 3 million northern rural Ugandans for the first time. So I can speak to this, I can wax lyrical about many investments that Meta has made in partnership with mobile operators and governments and all kinds of stuff. We can send you data points. But at the same time, I can speak to 20 million women and young people we've trained through Boost and She Means Business. I can point to 28.5 million people we've trained in digital literacy. I can give you all the figures about the work that we continue to do. I can tell you about Free Basics and Flex, which enable people who can't afford to get online to use Facebook and whatever else for free. I can do all of that. Partnership has been key and will continue to be key. I can't stress enough, and I don't want to keep going back to it, the opportunity that I feel open source AI and Llama in particular holds. It's no coincidence that it is the most downloaded AI model for building in the world. We're going 1 million downloads, and as I said, across the continent and beyond, people are building on top of it. So I think Meta continues to think holistically about how we connect the unconnected, but beyond that, and I think we still need to think about that, as Rashid said, there are many kind of basic issues. They're not basic, but I'm using this very deliberately, everybody. Basic issues that we still need to resolve. But I do want to say that we will continue working towards it holistically. And AI, because of the promise that I believe it holds for the continent in every sector, I know we've focused on education and health, but agriculture and just every sector, I think we need to continue providing. I think that's why Meta is here, to continue to provide that piece, and that's why Mark and the whole Meta team is so intent on ensuring that open source AI becomes the dominant model, unlike ChatGPT and other models that are closed, where you have to provide your data to it, where you have to have continued subscriptions or whatever else. We are keen to ensure you and whomever else has access to AI and can build on top of it for free. Essentially, almost. There are costs, there are tokens and all kinds of stuff, but for free. So holistically is the short answer.
Thank you, Kojo. There's so much to learn and still so much to do in the space. And I'm turning to you, Rashid. You've been with Goldman Sachs and one of the big applications of AI has been in finance. So I would love to hear from you. What can we learn from what Goldman Sachs has been doing in AI-driven advancement in the space? What can African startups leverage and learn from that?
Absolutely. So I think a few weeks ago, there was an article in CNBC where our CIO, Marco Argenti, basically announced that we have now AI assistant available to thousands of employees in the firm. And again, this is a trend, right? Like in the big financial institutions, they're rolling this out with the idea that the first wins and the most safest, like the safest wins, would be in increasing operational efficiency, right? So that means how do you make sure that the existing employees, whether they are software engineers who are writing code, whether they are bankers who are working on deals, whether they are investment researchers who are sort of like doing recommendations, they have access to a very powerful way of summarizing huge amounts of data or pigging back on certain coding patterns or just generating test cases or whatever it happens to be, right? Like, and have that expert-led sort of interaction with AI. And this is in itself is going to be a huge game changer, right? Like, I think companies in Africa cannot afford to be left behind. This manual intensive human sort of centric approach is being augmented by AI in pretty much all the organizations. So that's something that we've doubled down in the firm. I think we've created a platform that essentially allows teams across the firm to innovate through this centralized mechanism without them having to start from scratch. It's got like the right governance in place. It's got the right controls, APIs, etc. I think there are many, and I'm going to come to them, very exciting opportunities when it comes to the product origination, just sort of all sorts of things that you can achieve as a result of having AI in the picture, when it comes to customer service and interaction, when it comes to risk management, cybersecurity. These are all big things that within the established banks and also the startups are key. But with all the excitement around AI, right, with all the sometimes hype that comes with it, within the financial services sector, I think it's a very regulated industry, and for the right reasons, like we want to protect our consumers. There are challenges, and I think those challenges are universal, including in Africa. Hallucination is something that has been talked about a lot. The other one is just the fact that there are inherent biases built into these models, right? And those, if we start using them in decision making, that's where it gets dangerous. That's where it can essentially, coupled with the third one, which is the lack of explainability. That's a real challenge, right? Like, you will end up with decisions if you rely on AI in your business process without actually understanding what's going on under the hood and without being able to correct those inherent biases. That can be a very slippery slope, and I think that's where we need to be just very careful. Now, having said that, right, like, it's not all doom and gloom, right? Like, I think once we sort of like know how to navigate those, and by the way, this is an active area of investment and research for all big players. When it comes to innovating in the financial product space, right, like just thinking about Africa and all the different, again, cultures and types of local environments that we need to cater for, microfinance, micro-investing, those are huge opportunities. Insurance, again, micro-insurance, providing products to people who traditionally didn't have access to those sort of things, being able to sort of assess risk systematically at scale using AI. And there's a long list of things that we can think about there. The risk management aspect is very sort of like tied to this. Customer interaction, again, I think there are huge portions of populations across the continent who don't, let alone just interacting with financial products, just having that basic financial knowledge and awareness, going back to the education part, right? Like just educating people about what it means to have access to a source of funding, how that can help them in their sort of like day-to-day, and what are the fallback options in case things go wrong. And providing that in a localized fashion, again, AI can definitely play a role there. So I think a ton of things. Going back to the banks, though, and just more of the bigger institutions, I think there are multiple things that we need to get right on the continent. Number one in my mind is just as we are moving to digital, the dealing with financial information and personally identifiable information, all the sort of like sensitivities around customer privacy, those remain huge challenge. And this is a cultural challenge more than technological challenge, right? Like I think my example is a few years ago, we went to the Sudanese embassy to renew our passports. And it was, all people were very nice people, but it was shocking, right? Like that we had dossiers, right? Like files upon files of paper printouts thrown, scattered across the floor with all sorts of very sensitive information. Everyone was just so casual about it, and it's like I was just asking, all right, so this is my file, and these are the kids, and where are you gonna? Just throw them on that pile, and it's like, all right. So we need to really be in the business of educating and just making sure that there's awareness of what's the cost, what are the potential risks for misusing this data in the financial sector. It's super critical. I think apart from that, there are multiple other things. One of the common challenges with using AI, and for that matter, any other technology, is people get very excited about the technology without actually thinking about the problem space. And usually it should be the other way around, right? Like, and this, I'm not coming up with this, right? Like if you listen to Steve Jobs, like from the 90s, Amazon's done this, right? Like it's always about starting with the problem, understanding who your customer is, working backwards from that, figuring out, all right, how can I use AI in this particular context in Africa? It doesn't mean that, all right, suddenly there's a new technology, we're gonna just divert all our resources towards implementing innovation on that new technology. I think it's gonna be at the expense of your core business model as an African bank. So I think we just need to strike the right balance. And again, at Goldman, that's what we are doing, right? Like we continue investing in our current sort of like capabilities, but we're also very actively looking at AI, and we are trying to strike the right balance there. And I think last but not least, right, like just if you think about in fact, two things. If you think about your employees, you need to make sure that if you start rolling out these AI solutions, they are equipped and educated to actually use them in the right way. It's kind of common sense, but you'd be surprised by the number of solutions that people haven't taken full advantage of. And I think there was a previous point about data quality. That's a huge one in the financial services sector. Like we need to make sure that the data is got like the right lineage, we know where it originates from, like it's got the right quality checks, it's got like the right senior ownership in terms of like how it's used, etc. So again, there are areas where we need to mature as banks on the continent.
Thank you, Rashid.
Can I just say there are a couple of things that jump out. One, we've heard about hallucinations. I think every company developing ChatGPT. every company developing AI. I have personally seen how aghast engineers are when there's a hallucination that happens. So I don't think, obviously it's hallucination, nobody wants that to happen, but the work that goes into eradicating hallucinations is earnest, it's deep, and in many ways very, very impactful. The other piece that Rashid mentioned I think is really, really important, and I found this out personally. AI is not going to do, at this point in time, everything for you. And this is the point you were making about making decisions using AI. I completely agree with you, but I think the example you gave is why we need to continue placing emphasis on human agency. So the reason why companies like ours want to make AI assistants is to assist human beings and to improve outcomes and improve. It's not to kind of make all decision making and everything you do in the hands of tech and AI. It's still for you to continue to use your brain, which I found out to my cost when I tried to do something at short notice and found out that I still had to do a lot of work myself. So that remains important.
You're using Llama?
No, I was using Llama, and I kind of against my natural inclination, asked it to do more than it probably wanted to for me. So I needed to do more. But it highlighted to me that human agency remains important. And I think governments, as I speak to them and as the team speaks to them, not just in Africa, but across the Middle East, across Turkey, understand that it can help, not only it in kind of governance and the private sector as well, but human agency will remain important. And this is why companies in this space doing this kind of work need to look at this holistically. It's not throw the tech out there. It's also about training people to determine, is this a hallucination or not? Can I continue, to ensure that they have the skills, aptitude, which they naturally have, to continue stress testing whether this particular response from their assistant is exactly what they need. And I think that's why training, like the training that we do at Meta across the continent and beyond, is so important.
I hear education, awareness, human agency. I don't think we have time for Q&A with the audience, so I'm turning to you three. And I'll ask you one question, and I want you all to give me an answer. If you could dream of one thing for Africa's digital future within the next 5 to 10 years, what would it be? And how do we get there? And I want to, like a 2-minute answer so we can get your thoughts all three. And I can start with you, Kojo.
I would say we need more digital commerce. If I could wave a magic wand, that's the first thing. So we have 17% of the world's population and just 2% of the world's digital commerce. So we're doing a lot of cash, and that's limiting. Less than 5% of the continent's GDP is online. And if we're really going to build continent-wide businesses that are going to scale, we need more digital commerce. So the second part of the question is, how do we get there? I think cross-country regulatory alignment is key. We're seeing this in expansion. You're going to go to 54 different countries, different regulations, different regulators, and what they find important. But if we have some sort of standards that you can passport your license, and Ghana, Rwanda recently just announced something. If you've passed through licensing in Ghana as a payment company, you can passport your license and go to Rwanda and start operating. So that's one way I think if we stretch that across the continent, it will be really transformative.
So you can go next, Rashid, or Kojo.
I'm greedy, so I'm not. I struggle with one. And you said dream. You said dream, and then you asked kind of how do we get there. Often I dream, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to fulfill that particular dream. I think those are the best dreams, right? So I'll throw a few out there. I think we've heard much, including from Prof, about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. I very, very much hope. We had a talk at lunch, and I was told that I have to exercise more patience, which I struggle with. But I very much hope that the number of countries that have signed and then ratified and have then aligned their legislation is completed well before the 10 years, right? So we do have this unified market that so many people speak about. But actually, if I was dreaming about a perfect situation, I think it would be one where the marriage of policy, regulation, and commercial business drive is completely aligned. Because my fear is, and I'm a public policy person, so that's why I'm going this way, my fear is that our region, and sub-Saharan Africa I'll speak to, but Africa as a whole, may get policy and regulation wrong. What I feel, I'm a student of history, so when I went to SOAS for the first time, it was African History and Development Studies. I was an idealist. When I went back, it was a Master's in Development Economics. Having studied history from the Industrial Revolution to today and having taken a part in the last 23 years, I feel we're at an inflection point. And you hear that all the time. But I feel with AI, we're at a critical point. And I feel one of the concerns I have is that we over-regulate. We heard a lot today about government, get out the way, get out the way. And I hear it, and you suspect someone who works for Meta would also say, government, get out the way, get out the way. I think government's essential to getting this right. Like critically important to getting it right, but the policy and regulation that we implement has to be in tune, not beholden, bending, all kinds of stuff to the private sector, but within tune with what the private sector wants. And for anyone who questions what happens when you get that wrong, I would encourage you, don't just believe me, I would encourage you to look at what's happening in the EU at the moment, where whether Trump is here or not here or whatever else, questions were already being raised as to whether Europe who many of our governments look at as an example, have over-regulated. So those of you who wish to, go and read the letter from Mario Draghi about the way that Europe has too many laws and regulations, unimplemented, too many institutions, all kinds of stuff. I was going to throw it out there to this group because I think people are going to say, no, that's Ghana, that's Nigeria, that's South Africa. No, it's Europe. And I think we have an opportunity to learn how to toe the perfect line there in order to seize the opportunity that tech holds for this continent. And that's my dream, that we do seize that opportunity.
So Rashid, to close us off, what is your dream?
I am a simple person. I would love it to be quantifiable in the sense that we have at least 10 unicorn companies born in Africa.
Super.
And I think it's really sort of, and there are examples, right? Like Spotify is a great example of something that was born out of Sweden. So why can't we do the next thing in Africa with all the barriers, right? Like it used to be, you have to have physical goods transported or service-oriented, mean like you need to have people on the ground doing something. Like all that is disappearing with the advance of digital economies. I think the way to get there, we definitely need to double down on, and this was echoed throughout all these sessions, on how to sort out financing for the startups. How do you make sure that we have the right structures in place? Venture capitalism can play a role there, but it's really down to sort of like, unfortunately I do disagree with some of the people, the right government sort of like support. And again, the way that it's currently done is not necessarily the way it should be done, but we need to make sure that there is some top-down way of encouraging innovation through corporations, through governmental programs, and making sure that people have the safe place to try and fail and try and fail. Because I think, as Didier said, like in the previous session, right, like just, it's rare that someone succeeds, but the price of falling from that is going to be even bigger unless you have this sort of built-in education, right? Like, and we need to make sure that we have the right financial safety in place for these individuals to take that risk, as opposed to just being in a big corporation employed and sort of like just play it safely.
Thank you, Rashid. There's so much to unpack from this conversation, and I think we could go for hours, but...
Kwajo's dream?
He started with his dream.
I lost the one.
No, we got his dream. I want to thank you, Rashid, Kwadwo, and Kojo, for taking the time to come and talk about it with us today. I encourage you all to grab them in the hallway and ask them questions. There's so much to talk about on this, and I think the next decade will be so important for the continent on tech. So thank you. Thank you, Kwadwo.